open because you never know what could happen. So it looked like, and he got the feeling that he was going to be terminated, but the kid turned it around, and he's really doing well now, so that really worked well. And I've seen it where paperwork requirements, you got 30 days to get it up to snuff. If not, you know, the implied things that you're going to get terminated. Say that 30 days gets there, and they've really, really worked hard at it. They really put in their heart and soul. There's like 2 or 3 things they didn't get to. They had 2 days where they were sick, the case blew up, all kinds of stuff happened. Are you really going to terminate them, or are you going to maybe extend it another 30 days and see if they can get it up to snuff? So we don't really want to be draconian or really strict in our rules, at least in my thought. If Jim Pepperell or somebody disagrees, we'll have to talk about that and figure out what rules we would come up with. What did I do? I talked too much, that's what I did.
Hopefully,
Disciplinary report itself, recently been updated, so thanks for all your suggestions and feedback, those that gave us some ideas. Again, it's multi-use from a verbal all the way to termination. We talked about why we get a signature for verbal. It's to show that layer or progression of discipline to prove that we've started the disciplinary process. When you reach out to me, certainly whenever you can, if anything even starts with a verbal, try to get a hold of me, but if I'm not available, Nina or Don and Todd can walk you through it. Again, if it's a real serious issue, Donna will probably say, let's wait till Dan gets back, but if I'm on a 2-week vacation, we've got to do something. Or we might suspend them for a couple of days till I get back, or we have time to look into it and decide on the proper course of action. And then there's a section for support assistance offered. That's kind of your correction action plan. That's really the whole key to it, is to try to help them turn it around, so you come up with a plan of how you're going to do that. Sometimes it's just stop it, but you should come up with some specific ideas of how to help them turn it around.
that doesn't read like a corrective action plan to me. If I was looking at this form, when it says describe support and assistance offered, that's talking more about what I've done to mitigate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Corrective action plan is something's happened, what is the employee, maybe with some ongoing support and assistance going to do? It really doesn't equal corrective action plan to me.
Yeah, in a lot of cases, we don't even have to use that. There's just really simple, but I've seen people actually come up with a different document and attach it to it.
Mm-hmm.
This is the corrective action plan, and that's, I guess.
And we
what I
can
mean by that.
continue to do that?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep. And then I have to sign off, or somebody in my absence has to sign the report before you meet with the employee, so that we've reviewed it and it's consistent and it's fair and equitable and all that kind of fun stuff. The meeting, always have a witness present if you're going to meet in a disciplinary action. It kind of level or elevates it, the seriousness of it to the employee, that you've taken it seriously and there's a witness here. It also documents and proof that it actually happened, and it's not your word against others, or portions of the meeting. They could interpret it a different way, and the witness could back you up and say, no, this is what happened. So have a witness. For termination meetings, I'm pretty much facilitate the majority of those. If it's a real easier one, I guess, somebody's sleeping on the job and they know it and they're expecting it, and maybe the program manager or supervisor can do that, or Nina or somebody sit in. But it helps to have HR there too, because there's some extra information that we might go over in terms of unemployment or their 403B, what happens with that, and that kind of stuff. Be respectful and compassionate. Again, I'm going to lead most of these, and kind of got a feel for how to do it. It's not a skill that I'm proud of, but from doing it for many years now, it's something that I can do. So I'm not afraid of that. But I guess I learned in the very early days when I was here, I sat in on a termination. I didn't know what I was doing, and this program manager, I think it was obviously visibly nervous. It was a long report. He read every single word of the report. You don't necessarily have to do that. You can paraphrase it so they get the point of what's in the report, because they're going to get a copy of the actual report. So read in detail all the report. It's a very stern, almost like a punishment type thing. And the poor person just had to sit there for like 10, 15 minutes knowing that they're going to get fired, and it just wasn't compassionate at all. So there's a way to be compassionate and respectful and to the point. You don't have to drag it on and on and on. And then that's information that HR, if the HR is not there, then let us know, so we're prepared for that. Again, I'm putting myself in their shoes and balancing compassion with the facts and the outcome. If during that meeting, somebody says, well, can I resign? We said, well, we're going to let you go, can I resign? That's okay in most cases. I mean, it's the same result. The person's not going to be here anymore. There's an exception to that, which I'll talk about in a minute. But if they do that and you're okay with it, they need to write a letter right then and there before they leave. So you just give them a piece of paper, and it would be like, I, Joe, employee, hereby resign my position as a foster care worker on this date, and sign a date. So you have documentation that they resigned for their file. The exception, I think, would be if it's a really serious issue. Again, like they slapped a child, they abused a child, which is horrible. And they say, well, I'm just going to resign in the meeting, and say, well, we've already come to the determination that we have to let you go. And that tells our auditors, any law enforcement people, that we took it seriously and we terminated that employee, because that is against our values. And we're not going to just let them resign necessarily. Sometimes in that suspension period, they've got a clue, so they resign, not a whole lot we can do about that. But then we still write up the report and write on there, resigned in lieu of termination. It was our intent to terminate this employee. Thankfully, that doesn't happen very often, but it could. Okay. Terminations, making them stick. They're awful things. I've tossed and turned, and I've had supervisors in tears and say they didn't slept at all. They're a lousy thing to do, but it happens sometimes, and we need to make it appropriate, make it stick. So progressive discipline and documentation will help with that, and looking into it, investigating or fact-finding carefully and interviewing the proper people will help with that. Pinpointing the exact reason for discharge. We're an at-will employer. That's a Michigan law. A lot of states have at-will laws. And so in our paperwork, it says we're at will. And what that means is we can let anybody go for any reason or no reason at any time. And the employee can leave for any reason or no reason at any time as well. So there is that law. Well, we should act for cause, because there are protective statuses. So if, for example, you say there's a 59-year-old female, and you say, sorry, we're going to let you go. She goes, why? Well, we don't have to give you a reason. We're at will. This is time. It's time for you to go. She goes to her attorney and says, you know, they just said I had to go, and they were at will, and that was it. And, you know, I'm 59. I've been there a long time, and I'm making a good amount of money. And you're going to say, hey, we might have an age discrimination suit here. So you want to back it up for cause. You know, why were the reasons this person was let go, instead of just saying at will. I was at a seminar once, an attorney was speaking, and he said, he got a call from a new client, and he said, I want to let somebody go. And he said, what's the reason? What are you thinking? He said, I'm just going to at-will him. He just kind of came up with a word, at-will him. I think we're going to have to find some cause there before you just at-will him. So we can't just at-will them. Inform them in person with an HR representative, talk about that. Final filter is just to have some impartial person not involved, emotionally involved in the situation to be involved. That would be HR typically. Don't immediately terminate. I know that's probably easier said than done, but if you see this person slap a kid, it's, you're done, get out of here. But that's your emotional response, and we want to make sure we're prepared for everything. So then that's where you'd send them home. So you need to go home, and we're going to contact HR and follow the steps that HR tell us to do. Probably know they're going to be terminated, but at least we're going to do it properly and not emotionally. So just send them home if that kind of thing happens, and contact us. Again, they're horrible experiences, and I always, if you did your job the way you're supposed to do your job, and as I know you guys do, and it ends up in a termination, I always tell everybody, because they're feeling horrible, guilt-ridden, I just say it wasn't you, it was their action or inaction that caused this termination. It's nothing that you did, and you have no reason to feel guilty. Or I might say, they're having a hog with us, say in the last 6 months, have you found yourself working harder to keep them afloat than they have been working to keep themselves afloat? They say, yeah. I say, well, that tells you something. What does that tell you? So we got to remember that it's what they do or don't do, and we're going to help them as best as we can to succeed here, but sometimes it just doesn't happen, it doesn't work. Common mistakes, again, avoiding it because it's not fun to do. Being too friendly, that would be that boundary between manager, supervisor, and a friend, making sure you have proper boundaries in place. Failure to provide positive feedback. If you're constantly nagging on your staff, and you gotta get this going, and you're never on time in their paperwork, blah, 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 they're gonna feel that they just can't do anything right. If you're not giving positive feedback or encouragement, they're just gonna have a defeatist attitude, and I just can't do anything right with a supervisor. And then it's gonna go downhill pretty quickly. So, if you were at that Crucial Conversations training, she talked about the sandwich approach, where if you're gonna have a critical conversation, you start with a positive, then deal with the issue, and then end with a positive. So it's sandwiched between a couple of positives, and it's a little easier to take and to give, if that's possible. Assuming that they know all the rules, we got so many policies and procedures, so don't make an assumption that they know every one. I have to look some up sometimes. What did we decide 10 years ago and look it up on the old drive? So make sure that they're aware of the rules before you jump it down their throats. And if not, then that's an issue for them and us. Apologizing for the rules. I've seen people do this where they say, you broke this rule, I gotta write you up. I know, it's a stupid rule, I don't understand it either, but it's my job. And you're just kind of demeaning the rule, the policy, and yourself, really, just kind of demeaning, undermining, rather, your credibility. So if there's a policy or procedure that you think is really stupid, bring it to our attention, and we'll look into it, but don't apologize for it. Yes,
No, I'm just kidding.
Disciplinary action. Ignoring inappropriate behavior. We don't want to do that. When I first started here, I should stop, right? There was a guy who'd been here many, many, many years, and I was a rookie, and this was years ago, this was the late 90s. And he had a habit of telling inappropriate jokes. They were sexist, sometimes racist, but they were jokes, jokes. And people would politely laugh and sometimes cringe, and it just became the norm. Nobody addressed it. He just felt that that was okay to do. And so after a while, this rookie had to go and talk to this guy who'd been here for 20 years, and I was only here for a year, and note that times have changed, and that's not appropriate here. So that's a case of, an extreme case of letting something go forever.
But
Should have
also,
been.
if you don't say anything, maybe the guy thought he was being funny.
Right.
Like if nobody says anything.
Exactly. They're laughing, and he doesn't think it's wrong, so, and it hasn't been pointed out to him. It's okay to maybe do it at the bar with your friends, but not in a place of work. So, good point. Description of bad attitude without examples, we talked about that. Make sure you know what you're talking about when you tell somebody they have a bad attitude. So, Nina, next time you tell me I have a bad attitude.
Oh, I'm sorry. I combined them. It's on the other side.
All right, you view it as a punishment versus education. We've been over that. You don't get all sides of the story. You just assume you know all the facts and you don't go do some fact finding and talking to folks. Not having an open mind. Did they push your buttons? Is this an emotional hot topic for you? Kind of pull that out and try to look at it objectively again to make the right call. Other mitigating factors that possibly could be involved. And is it inconsistent with similar incidents and details? So we want to make sure we're as consistent as possible, knowing that each situation is a little bit unique. Other factors could be their history, prior discipline, those kind of things we might want to look at. Does the disciplinary action fit the crime? Would an outsider reading your report see it the way that you see it? All right. I think a little bit better than I thought we would. Some of the questions, I think we've answered some of these. Someone's doing just enough to get by or improves and then slacks back. That's a tough one because they're seemingly trying and you're giving them every break you can give. So we'll talk about what to do in that case. There comes a point where it's just kind of reaches that level where it's never going to change. They're always going to be like that. And we both realize the light bulb goes on. We've done everything we can. We've gone through progressive discipline. It's this way they're going to be. So it's probably not a good fit at that point, and we make the hard call to let them go. But those are tough because they're kind of vague. Is the staff required to sign documentation for it to be valid? No. I always go over and tell them, by signing this, you're signing that it's being reviewed with you and you're getting a copy of it, not that you necessarily agree with every single word that's in the document. And they can write a rebuttal if they want, and we'll attach it to the report. They can write their side of the story. If they refuse to sign it, then I just write on there, refuse to sign or decline to sign and initial it, so we know if they offered, it was offered to them and it was reviewed with them. Is there consistency or certain standards to progressing through? Yeah, not really. We talked about that gray area. There are certain things that will be consistent that we're going to follow past practice. But that's what HR is for, and that's what we'll talk about and collaborate with you on and make sure that we're being fair. And talk about how many times you talk to this person, and is it time for a verbal, that kind of thing. It's just so unique for each case. Again, we talked about absences and errors and how we don't want to be too strict on those, but at some point, if it becomes an issue, we do have to address it. Talk about the automatic termination. There will be some of those things, like I said, assault. Somebody says, can you help me take this box out to my car? And you lift the hatch up and there's like 6 DAB computers in there, and they have no explanation for it. Stealing is not a value that we have, so that's probably going to be a termination.
I think falling asleep on third shift.
Falling
is
asleep on
one
third
of those.
shift because of the safety of the kids over at the residential campus is a termination. Falsification of a document that would go to court or some entity like that, that would be a termination because you're falsifying facts and you're lying. Can training be assigned as mandatory discipline without documentation going into the personnel file? Sure, that's absolutely fine. You might get in that conversation of, I don't want to go down the road of discipline just yet. There's this training I saw in Relias, or the training committee has some things, or you might want to investigate some trainings. Let's try that to help you improve your performance, and then hopefully that'll help. We don't even have to go down the road of discipline. If they say, that's a dumb training, I'm not doing it, then you might have to write them up because they refused your suggestion. But you can try that. That's perfectly fine. We're trying to help them become a better employee. Factors such as length of service time between offenses. Again, sometimes, but we got to be careful about we're not making favoritism an issue, being playing favorites with other folks. Just because somebody worked here forever doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get a lighter sentence. Depends on the circumstances and the offense that happened. There's also kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, a thing called stacking. It doesn't necessarily have to always be worried about, well, they've only done this once, but they've been this employee that's just giving me fits, and they've been disciplined on these 4 other things in the last year. Those things can stack on each other. It doesn't have to be the same thing. So if they've got a paperwork violation and 3 absences, and they're rude in a meeting, and in cumulative effect, that's probably not a good employee that we need to do something about. So don't worry about, well, this person only did this one thing one time. We'll look at their entire record and see if there's a pattern. Okay, we got 15 minutes. Good.
15 minutes.
Yep.
You want to just do it all together?
Yeah, and then you guys will fall asleep.
We'll be done on time that way.
So we were going to break people up into groups so that we'd have more time. There's a lot of information here. So we can kind of just go through these and figure them out together. Jane comes to you alleging that she's been sexually harassed by a peer. Gives you 3 different instances involving suggested verbal interaction. She says there was a witness present at one of the interactions, but it was the least aggressive and potentially could be taken either way. She's a course of action. It's kind of a trick question, but any thoughts on what you might want to do with that?
What did you say, Sarah?
Send them right to HR.
That's the right answer. Yeah, that's something we should deal with. We're going to do our fact finding. Something like that kind of happened in the past, and I think it could go a number of ways. In that case, there were really no witnesses. It was a he said, she said. I actually brought the guy into my office and told him this had come to my attention, pulled out the harassment bullying policy. I want to make sure you're aware of this. This is what was told to me. He said, oh man, I didn't mean anything by it. I didn't say that, but I did say these 2 other things, but I was just complimenting her. It wasn't a big deal. That doesn't really matter. It's how it was perceived. It was perceived as harassment. So you just got to be careful what you say. I know you didn't mean to do it, but I'm putting you on notice that this has to stop, this kind of interaction. So it wasn't really disciplinary action, but it was kind of putting that person on notice that it was potentially inappropriate. It was taken as harassment, and we need to not have that happen again. You could, I guess, you can actually believe one person more than the other.